All right, treatment. So we'll talk more about treatment. And really, like I said, I think stuttering is kind of one of those disorders that certain SLPs aren't comfortable or don't feel they have enough, what I call schooling or learning about it. And here we go again. No two people who stutter are alike. So definitely there are some challenges there because what works for one person is not necessarily going to always work, or something that didn't work for somebody else might work really well for that person. So definitely I think fluency treatment is a lot of trial and error. So you go start with maybe your first go-to, and then you kind of go down the list of strategies to try. Now, I do want to just say a little disclaimer. In my experience in treating stuttering, I feel like it comes in waves. I feel like I have nobody that stutters, and all of a sudden I'll have a bunch of people that stutter. So definitely, I think also it's stuttering's one of those disorders that some people stutter. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have therapy or that they need therapy. So there are people I know that have had a stuttering issue but never had speech therapy. So I think stuttering is maybe I don't want to say a silent speech disorder, but I think it's only if somebody finds it a problem do people seek help for it. So there was one particular young man, I just actually screened him. The teacher had lots of concerns. The parent and the child didn't seem to have a lot of concerns. And the teacher was like, well, I heard a stutter. I said, well, doesn't necessarily mean that if it's not impacting him and it's not bothering him and he works through it, there's really no reason to what I would say change it or address it, because stuttering therapy only works when I don't want to say only works, really only is applicable if the person wants to improve or is responsive to treatment. So if somebody isn't, I think this is one of those disorders that, do you have to treat it? I don't want to say no. It's more about if it's a problem and others view it as a problem. And maybe sometimes what somebody views as a problem, another person doesn't. So I do feel like this can be challenging for people sometimes. And often stuttering kind of comes in waves. They did it for a while, and then it kind of went away, and then it comes back. So it is cyclical. Definitely, we've talked about that. And I do think that's why sometimes they get some intermittent help, but maybe just need some follow through or just a review of some strategies, and then they're right back, good to go. So that's what's challenging, I think, about stuttering. I don't think there's always a beginning and an end, or what worked for a while now doesn't work. Now we need to try something else. So that's what's challenging, I think, for therapists with stuttering. I also feel, we have better research on it. I don't feel like we have great evidence-based research for everything for this disorder either. It's improving, and there's some great researchers and people who kind of specialize, and a board certified fluency specialist is great. There's actually quite a few in Phoenix. So definitely something that if it's a huge issue, maybe a person seeking that very highly specialized therapist is a good idea. So managing fluency. Obviously, we're not curing stuttering. That's another thing too. I don't like using that word, and I don't like fixing. I don't like fix, and I don't like cure. When us as therapists, we're working on, compensatory strategies or what I call functional communication skills. So you can kind of look at this second slide. Hold on, I don't like how this looks. So the second slide we have here, hold on. It kind of explains what the strategy and what kind of treatment strategy it comes from. So we've got stuttering modification. So stuttering modification, for a quick review, is we're going to help the stutter be less noticeable. So we're not trying to take away the stutter. We're just trying to have the stuttering be less impactful, less severe or kind of work through the stutter quick, however you want to say that. So stuttering modification is just trying to lessen the stutter. Fluency shaping is actually trying to improve fluency, take away the stutter. And then we got devices. There's lots of different speech devices. And I really don't like core speaking as device, but there's definitely some kind of technology. Okay, metronome, if you've got musical talent, go for it. That's not me. Keeping time, not my specialty with regards to fluency, but there are my SLPA I had before. So my SLPA I have now, her name's Corey. The SLPA I had before, her name was Myra, and she was great with this. And actually then I had a graduate student from ASU who had a lot of musical background. She was great with chorus speaking and using a metronome, and that pacing with the metronome was great. So that was their wheelhouse, not necessarily mine. I just remember I had my graduate intern, and she did it with this one particular student who was very severe. I hadn't had a severe person with a stutter that severe in a very long time. And she did such a great job with him. And I was calling her, I'm like, hey, now you need to teach me. I was supposed to be teaching you. I need to get better at this. So managing fluency. So a lot of what I call it's more management. So we can't cure it, but we're trying to make sure that the communication isn't broken down. So if somebody is stuttering, what we're focusing on, are they able to communicate their thoughts and feelings, regardless of whether or not they're stuttering? Do we give them enough strategies to empower them to maintain adequate communication? So that's kind of my approach to all of this. And then, okay, the other thing too, kind of my go-to starting spot is, and if you read stuff from, oh gosh, Barry Guitar and Scott Yarus, I think I'm saying his name right. He's got some great stuff about the speech man. So this is an old strategy. This isn't anything, super current, but it's good. What I like about the speech man, actually, I like using it for other disorders too. The speech man is basically, we're creating a visual model of the speech mechanism. And why that's wonderful to do, it kind of starts, where are they having tension? Do they feel tension? Is their type of stuttering have tension? What are their articulators doing? So a lot of times stuttering is increasing awareness. What is my mouth doing? What is my neck doing? What is my face doing? And what happens, or what sounds, what does my mouth need to do when we have difficulty with certain sounds? So for instance, I did have a particular client, and this was in the clinic-based setting, and he was a little bit older, I would say, almost adult, late teens, like 19, really struggled. And what I noticed is he had a lot of weakness. He had some other things going on that he was going through, what I would call medical workup, trying to figure it out, but he had some weakness. So getting his mouth together for like M, P, B took a lot of mental effort. And again, obviously that rose a red flag for me from a speech perspective, hey, this might be some neurological things going on. And he was getting it checked out, and it had been going on a while. And we talked about, okay, so when you stop consonants. So just working on him recognizing which sounds do I need to put my mouth together. So M, P, B, and then kind of thinking in those terms of, okay, how can I kind of compensate? What's really hard? And he had a lot of problems, what I call with like movement with the upper part of his face. In general, he seemed to have some things with the nerves, and he had a pretty significant injury earlier. I think he was like 10 or 11, that maybe was residual of that. And so talking about that and kind of being more aware, I think just doing this, even with what I didn't call it a speech man, but I said, let's build a model, and where do you find the difficulties? Where do you feel the difficulties? And just kind of having them have awareness of where it occurs, or when it occurs, or why it occurs. And sometimes it is about the formation of the sound. Sometimes it's more about the area of the articulators. So when we're looking at like velar sounds, K and G, that velum part, or is it more like tongue up sounds? what I call those are alveolar. So is it N, is it T, is it D, is it L? And then looking at that speech science. So a lot of times too, when we have difficulty, it's a lot of times with our stop consonants because we stop the airflow. It's usually easier to be more fluent if we're not stopping the airflow. So those fricatives, so that's fun. I think that's what, SLP214, maybe some 215 or 210, excuse me, in there, 214 and 210. So really working on some of those things. Sorry, I got to move my pictures down here. Okay, so, and obviously too, working with the beliefs and feelings. How are you feeling? What are some things that you can do from what I would call global perspective? Okay, I know this is going to be a challenging situation. What are some things I can do? So kind of that awareness piece, working on, okay, how do I prepare my body to do something I know that might be hard? And then the other thing too, what are some other things that we know affects their ability to either use a compensatory strategy or what I would say, and I don't want to say bring on a stuttering, but we know typically they have fluency issues in these certain instances. So is it a time pressure? So if you only have, 5 minutes to talk or 2 minutes to talk or 1 minute to talk, you might not be fluent. Is it maybe physical tension? Is it tolerance of communication fluctuations? So sometimes I do know people who stutter can get in a real negative cycle, and then that just increases the amount of stuttering they have. Do they have a lot of anxiety? Do they have a lot of fear about when these things occur? So those are just some things that we want to be sure to address and work on. And often how you work on that with maybe a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old looks different than how you work on that with a 18, 19, 20-year-old. So definitely, but just that awareness piece is super critical and helpful when treating stuttering and a variety of stuttering types. So pragmatic skills that affect fluency. Okay, eye contact. Oftentimes we see people who stutter, they don't make eye contact. What are their strategies for handling time pressures? Reflective listening. So oftentimes too, what I do also is work with people when they stutter. Okay, what was my message? And oftentimes too, they need to do kind of what I would call the comprehension check. Did they understand what I said? And that kind of that give and take piece. All right. And oftentimes too, when I know dealing with someone who stutters, I might repeat, okay, so I'm understanding this to make sure that I did understand what they said or what their intention, because sometimes what happens too, when people stutter, they change what they wanted to say. They don't necessarily say all of what they want to say, or they're being very disfluent, so they don't want to keep going or give you all the information because they don't want to continue to have stuttering episodes. So turn taking, pausing. Why is that helpful? Why do we use that when we're in social situations? Obviously, from a pragmatic standpoint, we want that give and take piece. But why is that helpful when we're having fluency struggles? Why is that piece even more important? And also, what are my strategies? Light contacts, light touch. So oftentimes, if we see there's a lot of tension or what I would call like those hard sounds, so they kind of belt them out, there's lots of tension. It's like, this one kid, I remember he loved his boat, boat. It was always, and then sometimes it was a syllable repetition. Sometimes it was a block. It was like, there was so much tension for this B sound, especially, and there was like 5 words that he said all the time that he really struggled with. So we really worked on like light contacts with those words we know that were trigger words. We worked on how do I get the B less B? It's like he wanted to give all this energy out on the B sound. So sometimes it's analyzing the speech. So sometimes a language sample is probably the most helpful thing we can do when working with people who stutter, because then sometimes we can see the patterns or we can recognize, guess what? I remember too, and I thought it was different. I remember talking to another therapist who was a board certified fluency specialist. This particular client struggled with S-blends, which I thought might be easier. So we talked about why that is and looking at the the language sample, she was able to give me some helpful hints on what really was going on, where I was maybe focusing on the sound issue. And she, hey, but look at this and this. And then I think too, how much airflow. So sometimes, then this particular person had more difficulty with what I would say coordination, breathing in and then talking on the exhale. Oftentimes, there was fluency difficulties because the person was talking on the inhale, which is not common. And that's even why continuous sounds was more difficult for them, because they were running out of air. And so, I just remember, well, that's odd. That was different. And I hadn't thought about that. So sometimes the language sample will give you a lot of information, really help you identify when that'll happen. Easy start, easy onset. So a lot of times we try to reduce the rate of speech, the physical tension, and kind of that, how do we start into saying that easily? So cancellation. So I like cancellation. It's probably one of the first ones, because I'll say, hey, you're going to stutter. It's going to happen. And sometimes for some clients, it's really helpful. They start a sentence, they start to stutter, they stop, and guess what? Everything just canceled out. They start back at the beginning. Oftentimes that second go around, they're fluent. They're able to get the entire sentence out. Not always, not every time, but I do see that works really well for a lot of the clients I work with. So I do like that cancellation piece. And then I feel like it got the mind that, what I would call that loop. Okay, now I know what I want to say. It's going to get easier to say it. And slide out, pull out, ease out, whatever you want to call it. Definitely, we also work on reducing the tension. So oftentimes we'll see a lot of tension wherever it is. So sliding out of that tension, pulling out, easing out, however you want to call it, can help just reduce the tension. So really what we look at is, when you catch the moment of stutter, is working on that body awareness. How do I reduce the tension in my articulators, in my chest, in my face, wherever you're feeling the tension? So oftentimes, we'll use that terminology. And what I want to say too, light contacts, that's also a way of easing tension. And that's more, to me, easing tension at the beginning. So if they seem to have a lot of tension at the start of the word, I feel like light contacts are easier, where slide out, pull out is more light contacts at the end of the word, if the tension occurs on the tail end of things. So that's why the language sample helps you to identify maybe where to start as far as the strategy goes. And then voluntary stuttering. So what I want to say, oftentimes we are working with a client and we want to practice strategies. What do? Pseudo stuttering. What does that mean? Basically, is in therapy, we stutter on purpose. So pseudo stuttering is the activity we're going to do. And then the pseudo stuttering, so we know we're going to stutter, we know how we're going to stutter, so then we can practice a strategy. So in looking at how are we going to help this person, how are we going to practice strategy, we do pseudo stuttering. So we set it up, we stutter on purpose. So that's the activity. We're going to do a pseudo stuttering activity where we're going to practice light contacts. We're going to do a pseudo stuttering activity, and we're going to work on a cancellation. So we do the pseudo stuttering to set up the ability to practice a strategy. So, or, hey, I'm stuttering, now I'm feeling it. And sometimes what happens is you pseudo stutter and then you stutter on purpose. Or excuse me, you're stuttering on purpose and then you just start stuttering. So sometimes too, looking at, okay, this isn't you practicing a stutter, this is a real stutter. Okay, which should we try? Let's try cancellation. And then sometimes it's more about, hey, this entire session, we're going to practice this strategy. So pseudo stuttering is setting it up so the person can practice the strategy in more of what we call a controlled environment. It's not so much practicing, learning a strategy and then not being able to practice it. Obviously, in therapy, we want to practice. And again, as I said earlier, no two people who stutter are alike. And oftentimes we have to kind of revisit or practice or try a new strategy because that's not working. So any questions about that? Hopefully good. Okay. Oh, hold on. Okay, can you guys, am I sharing my screen? I think so. Yes, you are screen sharing. The green thing at the top says you are screen sharing. Okay, here we go. There's some great tips in here. There's some stuttering facts on this read and review, and tips for teachers, tips for parents. Oftentimes too, we want to empower parents to feel like they're supporting their child who's stuttering, as well as teachers or other caregivers. So there's some great, what I would call handouts, things to share with others. And here's some really good websites. So stuttering.org, I really like it. One of the books I used to use for this class is from this website. And they updated it not too long. So it's like, let me see if it's still here. Here we go. School-age child who stutters, working effectively with attitudes and emotions. I love this workbook. I use it a lot. I use it a lot, not just for stuttering, but for other things. And it's pretty affordable. Yeah, what is it? What is it, 20 bucks? Yes, 20 bucks. It's gone up in price. I think when I first bought it, it was 12. But definitely some things to look at. So there's some good resources in here. I really like this site. There's good reputable information. Again, finding reputable, sorry, we did not need the Spanish version. But so I like this. This is a good reference resources on this website, as well as westutter.org. So I like both of those. Those are good. There's some other ones. There's one more too. Why can't I think of what it is? I like the National Stuttering Association. They usually have good trainings and things. And then they have, here's for adults, here's for teens, here's for parents, here's for SLPs, researchers. So lots of good kind of what I call organization of reputable, good information. So I do like this. So when in doubt, these are my two go-to that I really, really think have great resources that are helpful and concise and to the point. Hold on 1 second. So this week, so let's talk about fluency enhancing tools assignment. So we do have a fluency observation and a read and review summary. Let me click on the read and review summary. So please review the information on the 2 websites listed on the read and review page. So look at this and really, what are some tips we tell parents or teachers? What are some key concepts we need to remind for, people who are supporting somebody with a fluency disorder? And did you find, and when you're finding out the information, is this helpful? Would this be helpful to you? Is this helpful for this particular person? So sometimes we have to look at our audience. Is it a caregiver? Is it in the educational realm? Is it a teacher? Is it a parent? So that's why they kind of have some different, what I call categories of information. And really, why would those websites be helpful to kind of give as resources for people? So I do like that. So that's the read and review. So definitely read through that, read through the handouts, read through the websites, and then fluency enhancing tools. So here are some techniques and tools. So when we're talking about a tool, let me clarify. What we're looking for is, here's a tool or here's a strategy to use. So tool strategies, here we go again with a bunch of different verbiage that means the same thing. How are you going to work on easy onset, or how are you going to teach this tool? How are you going to work on cancellation? How are you going to work on light touch, slide out or ease out? So obviously what we like what I like to do is kind of practice a strategy and then have something that represents that strategy. So oftentimes I work on like a reminder system. Hey, you're hearing the stuttering. What's our go-to strategy? So oftentimes too, I kind of, what's a way to remind our client to use the strategies? So really what we're working on are, here's the strategies to help with our stuttering episodes. All right, how are we going to practice using this type of strategy in the session? So tool strategy, like I said, oftentimes you'll hear those used interchangeably. And really, when I say, okay, what's in your toolbox? You know, you can use a cancellation, you know, you can use a light touch, you know, you can use an easy onset. How does that help you? And sometimes what we also notice is that the types of stuttering can kind of change too. There's usually 2 or 3 different kinds that someone has. Oftentimes is not just one. So if it's just, let's say, syllable repetition, oftentimes they learn a strategy and then that, you know, is handled, or what I say doesn't go away, but it lessens. It's when usually people have multi-component. They might have 2 different types of stuttering episodes. One might be a block, one might be a word repetition, one might be a syllable repetition, or interjections or long pauses, those kinds of things. So what are some tools to combat the different type of stuttering episodes we have? So a lot of identification, awareness, and then utilizing and practicing the tools that we have learned in therapy to improve the client's fluency. So that's what this assignment is about. There's plenty of examples and things on the internet. I'm looking for a simple explanation. So somebody said, how much of an explanation? What I'm looking for is like 1 or 2 sentences, maybe a paragraph about how are we going to practice using this tool in a therapy session. So that's really what that is. It's not a huge full-on what I call session plan or anything like that. It's like, here, give me a couple ways I might practice a cancellation. Give me a way I might practice the easy onset. So that's the purpose of this assignment, is here's strategies to improve fluency. How might I do that in a session? Any questions about that?
I have a question.
Sure.
So the way I did it, basically, I kind of like explained each of them, and then I provided an example for each on how I would implement them during an activity, like during a session.
Yep.
Is that okay?
Yep,
okay.
That's perfect. That's what I'm looking for.
All right, thank you.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And really, because, and like I said, I feel like fluency is one that a lot of us as therapists are like, oh gosh, I haven't had one. And sometimes, like I said, I feel like it goes in spurts. We don't have anybody that stutters, and all of a sudden we got 4. So that's kind of how caseloads work sometimes. And we have to review, okay, how do we do this again? It's like, it's not like articulation, where, you know, we've worked on almost every sound at some point on a regular basis, you know, SH, CH, S blends, R, L. Stuttering is kind of one of those things that, like I said, oh gosh, we haven't had somebody who stutters in a while, and all of a sudden you have a lot. So it's not as common or as frequent of a disorder that we treat, but on a typical caseload, you'll have one. But again, that's just kind of how this disorder is. And oftentimes, even just at school, like I said, there was one particular, you know, just happened to be my daughter's class when I was there for, you know, I work at the school where my kids are, and I was in the class for a different reason. And I wanted to see her presentation, and you know, it was on one of the perks. So noticing another student in his presentation, I remember noticing the fluency issues. And I was telling the teacher, I said, oh gosh, was he really nervous? Does he always talk that way? Is that something that you know? She's like, no, it's every day. This is how he talks. I was like, oh, okay, I need to start paying attention. And, you know, he's new to our school. We didn't know him before. And I was like, oh gosh, let me check his, you know, I had lots of concerns, But as I've gotten to know him, I talked to his parents, etc. It's really seems to not bother anybody else. Just maybe me as a SLP. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna until somebody says they need help. I'm not gonna kind of force the issue. And then that's kind of one of those things with stuttering. It's really, does somebody want to get support? Are parents very concerned? What's everybody's alert on this, on whether or not it needs to be treated? So that's kind of the 2 cents on stuttering. Any other questions? All righty. I appreciate you guys joining me. I'll post the recordings. And if you have any other questions, let me know.